And then the other thing is, have I cultivated a world around me that can speak and give me legitimate feedback? What are you seeing in my life that's going to keep me from reaching my full potential? You got to be able to ask people that question the whole way through. If you don't get feedback, then you can't transform those fundamental flaws in your life, and they become fatal flaws. You're so set in your ways, people can't stand you anymore. You're more of a distraction than a contribution. People don't want to ride the executive elevator with you anymore, and they move on. And it's brutal. It comes with a vengeance at that stage of life, to be unwanted, unnoticed, uninvited. But you brought it on yourself at some point because you've had no feedback loops in your life, no examination of your life.
Yo, Holy Hustle podcast here with a mentor, a friend, a pastor, a coach of mine, probably one of my favorite, and I get to tell you here live, make you blush a little bit, one of my favorite communicators, one of my favorite leaders, not just in title, but the way he leads his family, the way he leads his life, the way he's led his churches, and everything he's been a part of. And so super pumped to have you here. P. Scott, Pastor Scott, thank you so much for joining.
No, it's great to be. I've been watching Holy Hustle from the sidelines or the upper deck looking down. And man, when you asked to be on it, I said, absolutely yes. So even on a beautiful sunny day, man, I'm right here.
Well, I love you. We've known each other. You planted a couple churches. Just from my perspective, I think was Mars Hill in 2004 or 5?
2005. Actually, January of 06. Yeah, January 06 was the first
January
Sunday.
06. Okay. So I think we started going there sometime later that year at the school. And you dedicated my daughters, which is really cool, Sadie and Bella. And I've become, good friends with Tyler. And you have just the most beautiful family. You've done so much. You started a church in my hometown, Harvest. It's Harvest, right?
Yep, in Elk Grove. I was Harvest Church in 1990.
And then you went to 1990, and then you go to this mega church in Grand Rapids, and then you come back to start Mars Hill, change the name Real Life because of some funny legal reasons, and then you were a president of an Assemblies of God University, North Central in Minnesota. Now you're at Destiny Church. But man, that doesn't even all of that history. I feel like there needs to be a movie made about you. All that, there's still so much. The books they've written, one of the books you recently gave me, The Language of Influence and Personal Power, 316 Insights for Life and Learning, just these quotes. And you were talking right before this repository of content that you have for the last 25, 30 years of ministry and leadership and life. Bro, how did you know you were going to be a pastor, and ultimately, how did you become a leader of leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, again, it's great to be with you, Alejandro. And but I'm 61. It's a great space of life. It kind of like that space. You go through the first 10 years of your career. Let's say you get married at 20. You start your career. You go through about 10 years of the first kid, first car, first job, a lot of adrenaline. And then you go through about 30 years of the sames from about age 30 to 60. Same family, same love for the 49ers, same meatloaf on Monday night, same friends, and same kids. So you have repetition for about 3 decades. Then you kind of hit 60 and you enter what's called the last. Somewhere in the next 10 to 25 years, you're going to take the last trip to the family farm. You're going to buy your last car. You're going to say your last goodbyes. So I definitely have hit more reflection at 60. I certainly have tons of tread on the tire. I plan to live a long time and stay sharp, and to continue to be a contributor, not a distraction as I age. I want to get older, not old. The Bible is totally opposed to old, completely embraces older. So yeah, I'm getting older, and there's some things in life that only can be experienced by an elder. And so someone said, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, at this stage, I just want to grow into be a tremendous elder, because a lot has to go right in life to be considered an elder. And so it's an interesting time. But when it all starts moving in your early 20s, it's a combination of many things. I remember, I think it all started, and I'm not being overly dramatic, recess in sixth grade up at Wilburton Elementary School in Bellevue, Washington. I was a tall, skinny guy. I was built like a flamingo leg. That's how skinny I was, but I was tall. And so we had 15-minute recess, went out in the rainy covered patio area, pouring rain, in this jam full of 500 elementary kids. But we were sixth graders, so we got to dominate the good basketball hoop. Well, the two alpha males, one guy was Matt Ostango, the other guy was what was the other kid's name? It just escaped my mind. Scott Bodette. They were picking teams. There was basketball. There were 9 of us standing there. So somebody's going to be left out. So they're picking teams. It came down to this kid named Tommy, little 4'0" guy, couldn't play. And this other kid that was the best athlete in the school, but he was deaf. And back in the 70s, you wore this big, thick hearing aid. And his name was Dana. And I wouldn't even begin to mimic how he talked. It was very exaggerated, very loud. And they picked the other kid who over the kid that was the best athlete. That kid, now the teams were 5-5, so he was left out. He turned away. He walked straight into the rain. He let out a guttural noise, Ollie, that I will never forget, of rejection. Just this painful guttural noise. Now, I didn't do anything. I should have been in 5th grade. I was in school early because it was free daycare when I was 4. So I was way ahead of my class. I didn't have any moral resolve, but I remember hearing that kid groan. I think right then God called me to the ministry, because I felt pain in this person, even though I couldn't define it or mitigate it. I think something started there. And then I was a jokester. I never stopped talking. So even when I was a freshman on the team bus with the varsity, JV, and freshman basketball teams, the varsity would call me to the back of the bus at some point on a road trip. I'd be summoned to the back of the bus by the seniors, and they would say, tell us a story. Because I could make people laugh. I could tell stories. They weren't godly stories back then, but I remember being able to entertain everybody in the back of the bus as a 9th grader. So I knew that my speaking skills, storytelling skills, all of that, as I look back, but it was that burden of the heart. And then the Lord called me to preach the gospel when I was 17 in a Sunday night service. But a lot went on then, man, in my life. Total chaos. I will say this super fast. Moved 27 times as a kid. By the time I was 16, went to a different school, K through 8th, and never went to the same school twice. So people say, how'd you get from point A to point B in your life in leadership? I said, my childhood, I had a huge jump start. They go, what was it? Money, education? I said, no, chaos, total chaos. I said, because when you move schools that much, either you develop anger or you develop superpowers for connecting with people. So all that friendship making in K, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, when I was at a different school, all of that became kind of super adult powers in my life to bridge, be in a strange setting, meet someone new, form relationship, and not get comfortable. So all of that, dude, is in the mix.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of the coaching. You work with some been in and around some of the most successful entrepreneurs. You got a buddy down there in Silicon Valley, so you've been around that stuff. But one question I had is you talked about that, like trauma or chaos or things as kids. That stuff goes somewhere as we get older. And I guess my question would be, what's some of the negative side that you noticed growing up, or maybe you've dealt with as in ministry and as a leader?
Yeah, well, clearly, if I didn't have a genuine encounter with Jesus when I was about 16, I would have had no portal, no place to dump it all like a wheelbarrow at the foot of the cross. Everything I've done to myself, everything that was done to me, all of it's in the wheelbarrow, Ollie, and you dump it all. The pain, the sin, all of it. It all goes there. And that was a dramatic point of new beginning in my life. And then followed up quick by great mentors, man. I had great older men. When I was 16, I had friends that were 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old when I was 16. So I saw quality living. I saw godly men at every stage of my future. So I've never felt lost and without a bearing, because I've had imagery and practice that was seared into my heart when I was young. So I go, oh, this is what a 30-year-old, that's what a 40-year-old with teenagers, that's what a 50-year-old empty nester, that's a 60-year-old grandpa, that's a 70-year-old widow. At every stage, I've seen phenomenal men. So that combination, and was in good churches too when I found the Lord. So all of that helped me. If people don't have that combination, their relationship or their encounter with Christ was kind of quasi. It was this half thing. It was church, religion. It was a moment, car wash, and then they had no mentors. They weren't part of a life-giving church, and they had no clear pictures. Because when we're young, most of us are driven, they grew up the way I grew up, with a vision of what not to be. And that can take you about 10 years. There's a lot of adrenaline in not wanting to be your father. But not being your dad is not a vision for your life. It's full of, you'll hold your mouth because you don't want to scream at your young wife the way that dad screamed. But at some point, that vision of what not to be has to shift into a vision of what to become. And if you don't have very powerful mentors that gives you new images of the future, of what to become, you're going to lose your way at 30, and all that adrenaline not to be your father is gone, and you're going to start replicating everything you hated. Because, a lot of leaders don't have legacy platforms, and so they don't know what to become. Some leaders have legacy platforms and they feel like, I can't live up to it. So there's dynamic in both ways, Alejandro. But if you don't have that encounter, the mentor, and the culture and the setting that you're immersed in, it's a tough road.
Yeah, I think that environment's so key. One of the things that I love so much about you are a world-class father. You and Pastor Karen are world-class parents, amazing kids. And I just remember one time, two things when it comes to to your preachings. A lot of it was about sports, and a lot of it was about your family. And you used to talk to me about your kids and how if they argued, you would make them like go tell each other, apologize, tell each other you love each other, hug it out, all that kind of stuff. And as someone whose father left when he was young, very dysfunctional family growing up, man, one of the things I was scared most of was having kids, and I was going to repeat those same things. But man, I look back now and I think there's a lot of sometimes imposter syndrome. Like, man, I could do better as a dad. I could do more, kind of like Schindler's List. At the end of it, I could have did more. I could have sold this. I could have, and we're always thinking that, man. But I got to an age, man, where just like a lot of people asking me for advice on parenting. Like I use what you said. Like my girls cannot argue with each other. Like if they do, they're getting together, they're hugging it out, they're telling each other they're sorry, they love each other. And that's as a result of just what you modeled. And so it's probably not just me, it's probably hundreds, maybe thousands of parents that modeled so much of what you guys taught. So you guys are world-class parents.
And
you talked about, go ahead.
Can I just insert right there so I don't want this to slip away? Because you nailed a huge thing. When I was younger, I didn't realize that the entire second half of my life would be predicated on the harmony and relationship of the siblings. So when the kids were little, I had a great relationship with my kids. But the second half of our adult life has nothing to do with our relationship with our kids. It has everything to do with their relationship with each other. Because if siblings form feuds in their adult life, it destroys the joy of the parent's second half of their life. Because now you're always picking sides. Are they there? Are they there? I can't tell you the anxiety in people my age because they are having to referee bitterness, feuds, and breakdowns. And especially with COVID, with masks, the election, vaccinations, everything was accelerated. But we watch so many people our age whose lives every day, it's almost like supervised visits, because are they coming? Are they coming? And these are siblings that they allowed when they were young to form a wedge, and the parents took their eye off the ball and didn't understand how that plays out when those kids are 30. Well, it destroys the whole joy of your adult life. So I tell young families, you got to stay on top of it. Our kids fought. They did this, they did that. But man, we would do a huddle cuddle as fast as possible and say, listen, we are going to love each other, and you're going to be best friends for the rest of your life. And I said that 1,000 times in my home. And I will tell you right now, the fact that those 4 kids are such great friends is the entirety of Karen and I's peaceableness in our life.
I love that. And it's been a huge impact on my girls, and just the way people comment about how much they love each other, how good of kids. And I owe so much of that wisdom as a result of you. This is so key, environment. I want to talk about mentors for leaders and ultimately successful leaders. Now we're talking pastors, successful entrepreneurs, people that make me the most nervous is when they don't have a mentor, leader, coach in their ear.
Yeah.
Those people make me the most nervous. And you and I never published this podcast. I've always wanted to be a podcast. You and I talked when I was in Seattle. And at the time, this is fascinating. I don't know if you recall this, but we talked about mega church pastors. We talked about this. I said, what are your thoughts on like this fame side, this celebrity side of pastors? And you're like, Alejandro, and I'm trying to do my best, Sky Hagan, Alejandro, now we're talking. Like this could get dangerous. And as we've seen right before our eyes over the last few years, you see so much of that, kind of some issues with Carl Lentz and other pastors that are falling by the wayside. Can you talk a little bit about how you, as kind of a pastor of pastors, leader of leaders, what you see when you look at that from your seat and your vantage point, and what entrepreneurs, business people, church leaders can do to avoid those things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Little tiny story tucked in 2 Kings. I think it's chapter 5. It's about Naaman. Naaman was a powerful leader. He contracts leprosy. He calls for the great man of God to come. So Elisha's going to come. But Elisha sends his assistant to go pray for Naaman. And Naaman is offended. And he says, I thought the great man of God was going to come and wave his hand over me. And instead, this nameless 3rd, 4th rank person in the kingdom goes and gives him the message of life, go dip 7 times in the Jordan. But it says that Naaman went into a rage. And that's what power does to people, because power only wants to talk to other powerful people. So that's why when you see a known minister fall, the worst imaginable thing is when they latch into another known ministry. And we're seeing it right now, where I'm famous, so only famous people can help me. And that is a horrible methodology. The best thing that could ever happen to a famous pastor when they fall is for some pastor of a successful church of 400 in a small community without a social media presence to come and help rebuild that guy's life and marriage. But we tend to, because I perceive myself as famous, that I only walk in famous lines. I'm still, even when I've been humiliated, I'm still going to lean into fame and power. And it's a terrible mistake that we make psychologically, spiritually, Alejandro. But I think the celebrity thing, it's nothing new. When in the 70s and 80s, when I was just getting rolling, we had huge celebrity ministries. It's lived out on social media, so the speed and the information travels faster. But you still had people doing foolish things with money, their bodies, sexuality. And another thing too, here's the tough thing about social media is, and I watched this with a very famous minister that was right next to me in Grand Rapids that we all can remember a few years ago. He was known for innovation. And then when you start running out of ideas, innovation moves into being provocative. So now you're provocative with as much as you can be, but then you run out of things to be provocative about. So now you have to be provocative with the Bible. And so now you're saying things that are provocative in scripture. It's almost like a sinking ship that's throwing the deck chairs off. And ultimately, all I have left is to throw you off to save myself. So you see the shock jock, the Howard Stern model of communication, in which I've got to continually say something so provocative to keep people's attention. And once you're committed to the path of being provocative, you can't get out of it. And pretty soon, that's when I put the egg timer on. I said, that's got about 24 months left. It's because what's going to happen? She's going to say something contrary to scripture, to orthodoxy. And the church is going to say, see ya, as we've seen that happen. And so celebrity and that need to be provocative, to keep eyes, to keep being noticed. And again, social media is all about, we've gone through this last 10, 15 years, notice me, notice me, notice me, but don't examine me. I don't want to be examined. I want to be noticed. But the whole premise for sacred leadership, biblical leadership, even if it's not pulpit or teaching ministry, you're a believer that loves God, that is high-end quality in the marketplace, wants to make an impact, make money, use money. At some point, sacred leadership is all about being examined and not being noticed. And so you can't maintain authority. You can maintain influence, some scale of notoriety, but not authority if you are avoiding examination of your life. And some people that get famous, they can't take it. They just run from it. So they just keep running to more famous people, and it just runs out at some point. It's like Hitler being down in the bunker by himself.
Yeah, no, that's good. You know, the marketer in me goes, and I'm sure there are people that are going, well, I gotta, Scott, I gotta stand out. I gotta be different. Like you have a book on language and personal power. Like, what is the right recipe or framework for growing an influence, impacting an audience, serving them well with their best interests in mind, as opposed to kind of persuading people, manipulating people for what's in my best interest? And so what's that fine line that you find to be a great leader of influence today?
Well, I believe that the Lord in the scripture endorses creativity and excellence. Okay. Creativity and excellence. Those are fabulous categories that allow me to freelance and to become, to innovate, to be fast, to be unique, to be distinguishable, but it's never at the expense of somebody else. Anything that requires me to take from you in order for me to possess, that's where that check of the Holy Spirit as a leader, as somebody, I want 5 million people to watch my leadership class. What can I do? Is it quality? Is it hitting the need? I think about that all the time, but it's never at the expense or the deterioration or tearing down of another human being, or at the expense of the fundamentals in scripture of faith, speech, conduct, love, and purity. That's always been my dashboard. 1 Timothy 4:12 and 13. Let no one look down on your life, your youthfulness, but be thou an example in faith, speech, conduct, love, and purity. So that's my dashboard. That's my gas tank, my speedometer, my heat. That's what I look at, faith, speech, conduct, love, and purity. And so if I'm violating one of those 5 things and I feel that check, and then the other thing is, have I cultivated a world around me that can speak and give me legitimate feedback? What are you seeing in my life that's going to keep me from reaching my full potential? You got to be able to ask people that question the whole way through. If you don't get feedback, then you can't transform those fundamental flaws in your life, and they become fatal flaws, usually north of 60. You're so set in your ways, people can't stand you anymore. You're more of a distraction than a contribution. People don't want to ride the executive elevator with you anymore, and they move on. And it's brutal. It comes with a vengeance at that stage of life, to be unwanted, unnoticed, uninvited, but you brought it on yourself. at some point because you've had no feedback loops in your life, no examination of your life.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think, the question becomes then how do you find those mentors or pastors or coaches in your life? What type of posture? What can you do to get on the radar of those people when they're busy? They have people they're pastoring, and leaders, good leaders are busy. How do you find someone like that to, hey, I got some gaps, I got some blind spots, Scott. Can you check in on me? Like what's the approach there?
It's a great question. First of all, the person longing for that, they have to throw down their nets and follow and get in the steps of the mentor. That mentor
Mm,
is not sitting around. When I was young, I wondered why my first pastor, Charles Crabtree, wasn't ever calling me. I didn't realize how busy he was. And so, little quick story is all the staff used to complain about their lack of one-on-one mentoring. And I was complaining too. And we all had to rotate this 8 o'clock service to give announcements. And so what happened is you would have to get there at 7:15 early, go into the 8 o'clock service with Charles Crabtree, do announcements. But you would complain because it would be every 8 weeks, it would be your turn. So I do it for the second time. I'm sitting there drinking coffee. I'm 20 years old. We're talking about his library, asked him a question. And I'm sitting there going, is this great or what? I'm having 45 alone minutes with one of the greatest leaders in the world. So the next staff meeting, I said, hey, I know I'm young. I'm dumb. I drool on myself. I'm stupid. I don't get it. You guys are the pros. You need sleep. You guys are working. I know I'm an idiot, but hey, if you guys don't mind, I'll be more than happy to do that every week. They go, what? It's all yours, man. So guess what, Alejandro? I made it as easy as possible to get into the setting of Charles Crabtree. I had 45 minutes alone with him every week for 5 years. And that's why when I was inaugurated president of North Central, who preached it? Charles Crabtree. We became a father-son relationship. But I did. So back to the mentor. The mentee has to get into the steps, throw down your net, get into the steps of that person, take their class, read their books, get on their podcast. Secondly, I tell young guys, young men and women, don't look for one all-consuming mentor. Nobody's your guru. I had four primary men. Each one taught me a little different aspect of my leadership whole. So don't put it on one person. You got to be my dad. You got to teach me how to preach. You got to teach me how to handle money. You got to teach me how to be a husband. I found that it's really a combination of 2 to 3, maybe 4 highly significant people that are teaching you a facet of your life. But if I feel the burden to be the all-consuming one mentor of this make or break situation, I back away from that because I can't deliver that. So even at this stage, as I'm around great leaders, we talked about some of them before here, I'm not looking to them to open every door for me I'm not looking for one of them to do all that for me. I'm learning an aspect from this way forward of my life. And so have a handful of mentors, not just one.
Now, what is the filter that you, as the mentor, what makes a great mentor? Not just a good mentor that, yeah, I can answer some questions because got experience, but what makes a great mentor?
First of all, it's a seasoned life that has
Mm,
reproduced, not simply produced.
mm,
So leadership is not about production. It's about reproduction. So
mm.
have I been able at this stage of my life to reproduce my life in other people? Is there somebody that's taken the ideas and taken the observational framework of my life? They simply have watched your life and tried to emulate it. That is key. And when I look for those people that inspire my life, there's a reproduction, there's a sustainability. They have put together 1,000 days in a row that all look the same. There's something about them today that looks just like yesterday. There's something about them tomorrow that looks like today, rather than guessing which version of you is coming through the door. So, I mean,
Mm.
there are some business mentors that help us with ideation. We bounce creative ideas. They just have an ability with words. I get calls every week from somebody who says, hey, I'm preaching on this Sunday. How can I say this better? And I can usually,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like a vending machine, but it's my skill set. I know how to synthesize. I love language. I've been around a while, and I can help people say things that they're like, that's how I want to say that. So I enjoy that skill set and giving it away to people that I love. And so, there's no clock, there's no money for that. That's just like, hey, because I enjoy that. But I ultimately, the people that inspire my life are people that have reproduced something in their life, not just produced a profit, produced an influence. They've reproduced in people something that they themselves are. But yeah, that consistency, yeah, their family, their marriage, their kids. I may get an idea from them, but I would never call them a mentor. I would never say I'm seeking to emulate something from you. You are a source of ideas for me. You're like somebody that I bounce things off of. But a real life mentor is somebody that represents the future that you want to possess. Like what in their life that they have that I want to possess. Like for me, we got these 11 grandkids now. So I got a whole new thing. I'm trying to find successful grandparents, grandfathers, how grandfathers have done it. I don't know. Maybe that it's about have they reproduced?
Yeah. And how are you doing that now? Like, with grandfathers, like at 61, still learning, right? You're still wanting to grow. Like, how are you doing this as Gramps now?
Well, you have to figure out, here's how I did it as a father. I had direct access. How do great grandfathers build great stories and memories and markers for their grandchildren? Because I've been to enough funerals where a 23-year-old grandson is talking about his grandfather. And I mean, it's powerful to be in the presence of a godly grandfather at his passing and to hear the kids, not just their kids that are in their probably their 40s or 50s, but the grandkids that are in their early 20s, and that space of impact that a grandfather has upon teenagers and early 20s. And that's usually when the transition then starts to happen where they pass away. But man, when you're around those kids, like, okay, what happened in that space? And it was time. It was creating resources. You should have a little bit more money at this stage of your life to be able to create settings and platforms for your grandchildren, giving them educational opportunities, giving them missions trips, and then just fishing and talking, laughing, having fun. We just planned a big slime party for the backyard, coming up with my grandkids. So, I'll buy the slime and we're going to have a blast, but there's something about them seeing a man in his 60s that's childlike and enjoys their presence. Man, it just creates this alter experience in this culture where children are raising themselves. Being a grandfather has never been more critical in this culture than it is right now.
Why do you say that?
I just believe because children have no emotional markers. Remember what I said about I saw life in the future? What a grandparent does, it gives the child hope when they're teenagers that life can go well, that you can be peaceable. You've lived for the Lord. You've lived your life clean of alcohol and drugs, and you have done the right thing with your money. And so when they see the chaos of their culture, they see through the smoke and they see, wait a minute, I saw a life that was lived well. I'm going after them. I'm with them. I'm not with you. I'm with them. And so I think that imprint is huge, especially in this chaotic world where families are no longer presented as units, Alejandro.
Yeah, that is key, and that's one thing for me wanting to double down and being so intentional about the family unit. It's massive for me. So switching gears here, let's say I'm a successful real estate agent, uber successful, crushing it, tithing, giving, faithful on Sundays as an usher. I'm successful in some sphere, but I may not have a lot of influence. But I feel like I have something inside of me to give back and to help others. Maybe I start a podcast one day. Maybe I start a course. Maybe I just journal on my social media about what I'm doing or whatever. What is your framework, or if like, hey, I come to you, Scott, and I say, hey, I want you to coach me on growing my influence. I love what you said. I want to be an influential leader. What are my first steps to growing that?
And it's a great question. I still struggle with what I call increase in life. Scripture says plant water, God gives increase. I think strategic scaling can be disappointing at times. I published two very highly marketed books in 2001 and two at Charisma House. I sold 22,000 books. There was no social media. The publisher thought that we would sell 1 million. He publicly announced me as the next Max Lucado of the charismatic world. I mean, no pressure. And then I stumble on a book that I didn't really intend to write, a collection of sayings that I self-published. It got discovered, and I've sold tens of thousands of these books. And so it leaves you in a quandary, like, so how does that outcome, how do we guarantee our outcomes? I think where influence starts, it always is in the curation of content. I say it this way, that people, you got to keep the right proportion of icing to the cake. You can't have 1 inch of cake and 4 inches of icing. It's 4 inches of cake, 1 inch of icing. So content is the cake. Creativity is the icing. And sometimes we are trying to put a disproportionate amount of creativity on very shallow content. So how does content merge? Well, for me personally, I've melded the disciplines of speaking, writing, and thinking. Sometimes you're known as a great communicator, but you don't write or think much. You just are just a gifted talker. Sometimes you're a good thinker and maybe even a writer, but you don't speak. So I always ask leaders, how do you combine all three disciplines? Because all three feed on each other. I was a gifted joke teller in high school, but I didn't think clearly. I wasn't taught how to think critically. Education, my master's, my PhD process taught me how to think about the world around me at a slower pace, and then how to capture epiphany. The key to influence and content, Ollie, is epiphany. An epiphany is something that arrives suddenly, but most people can't capture epiphanies. There's a great philosopher, his name is John Schotter, and he talks about the different dimensions of noticing. And the seventh dimension is the highest of noticing, and it's called a disquiet. A disquiet is the most subtle thing the human soul can feel. It's the most subtle breeze, the subtle sound. You feel a disquiet that gets your attention. Writing, journaling helps you capture disquiets. Disquiets typically turn into an insight, into a noticing of some kind, which then my vocabulary is developing because I'm writing. I'm growing my vocabulary. And I will tell you, Ollie, one thing I do anytime I read any word that I don't know, is I stop and look it up. And here's a little hack. I don't let people know my secret sauce, but I'm going to give a secret sauce now. Let's say you want to study a topic. Let's say you want to study anxiety. Instead of typing in anxiety into the space bar, type in anxiety and then type PDF. And what it does, it unlocks hundreds of academic articles on anxiety. So you get pop culture. If you just type in, I want to study anxiety, you get all this stuff that everybody's looking at. If you want to get into the secret vault of language and learning, type in anxiety and then type PDF. These are peer review journal articles. These are academic articles on anxiety. Now you're seeing language and you're seeing thought processes on anxiety. If you just type in PDF, Now, a lot of PDFs you have to buy. Most of them, half of them are free.
Yeah.
You'll download stuff you never knew existed on the planet, page after page of academic, thoughtful writing on a topic. That has grown my language. So I just gave away one of my absolute secrets.
Yeah, that's massive. And I remember back in the day, you had notes for leaders, and it's just like stream of consciousness. And one of the biggest things, Scott, and this is part of the reason I started the podcast, just to consistently improve language, right? I had so much in my head, so much in my heart, but I wasn't producing and creating that content. So you have so much in your head. You were saying right before when you preach and you speak, you don't really need notes anymore. But in your 20s, 30s, 40s, someone that goes, I've never created content, where do they start?
Yeah. I just
I want to post more. I
Yeah.
want to share what's on my heart.
Somewhere in their posting, and again, I won't say I was an early adopter of putting pithy things.
You were.
But it's the way I think. But it's the result though of more lengthy writing, Alejandro. If you just get suckered into, I just do a podcast, share my opinions, people are there's no depth to it after a period of time. You have to talk about more than one thing and go deep. Study and education gives you the rigor to talk about several things with a sense of depth and language. So writing's the key. Writing is the key. You've got to find a way to post content or a blog, LinkedIn articles that test your writing. Then go find a third grade teacher in your church. Mine was Audrey Brooks, third grade teacher. I would give her a 2-page article I'd written. She gave me back 12 pages of notes. It was like the miracle of the fishes and the loaves. I go, how did 2 pages turn into 12 pages of notes? And ultimately, she taught me how to write. And she loved being an editor, never charged me a penny. She would read my papers. This doesn't make sense. Better word here. Until finally, after a couple of years, I got a happy face and no corrections. It was a big day from my third grade teacher. Find an editor, find a mechanism, LinkedIn articles, a paragraph or two on Facebook. Even though the world wants fast content, concise writing is critical to improve your speaking, your vocabulary. Look at that and see where you're replicating words in sentences. Use your thesaurus on your word file. And then there is magnificent tools with click, and it's in front of you on word exchange, synonyms. I'm always trying to find a better way to say something. I do this every day when I speak, right? Come up with a one-liner. How can I say this better? Tip of the spear that can pierce through. So I do all of those disciplines now. And I don't lean into everything that's already there from the years of doing this. But you got to write, Alejandro. If you want to speak better, you want to think better, you have to write.
Yeah, it's good. And that's, shoot or shoot, right? Writers write. And that's probably the thing that I've and maybe it's imposter syndrome for folks. Maybe it's I don't feel like I have anything to say. What would you say to folks? Scott, I don't feel worthy. I have imposter syndrome. I just don't know what to say, Scott. What would you say to someone that it's there? I got something inside of me. I just don't know where to start.
Yeah. And if the desire is to increase influence, if the desire is to scale up your influence, but you can't engage in writing, I don't think there's a way forward for that person. You've got to get through that feeling. And again, the best way is you can publish now. It used to be you had to get published in magazines, journals. This is 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I started. Yeah. And a lot of disappointment, a lot of not hearing. Now with LinkedIn, Facebook, just start publishing your writings and then kind of gauge the feedback. But you have to have that third grade teacher help you edit your posts, because you can look foolish quickly as a writer, or someone either says that's not accurate, you feel humiliation and you withdraw back into shame and inability. I got a D in college English. And for a long time, for about a decade, I said, I'm not a writer because I got a D in English. And so I had to disassociate that D from writing. And then I don't just dive in, and I'm 61. I published my first article when I was 30. And I look at them now, they're so basic, but that constant writing changed the trajectory of my life, my speaking
and
life,
you said it was,
and my thinking life.
and you said it was like you're still, like you're saying you're still doing it. I think some leaders, they get to a point where like, I've kind of arrived. I kind of made it. And like for you at 61, already such an amazing speaker, still having the discipline to improve, to grow. Can I get 1% better here? Can I get 2% better here? Can I get 0.3% better here over time? I think is just a powerful thing. So
And
now
Ollie,
go ahead.
you have to have the thrill of learning, not the thrill of delivery. So an epiphany it's so incredible to be alone and to think of something, refine it with language, and it's true and you can feel it. Most of the not your reaction to what I'm writing, but my reaction to what I'm writing. It's an epiphany. It's like, that's true. I'm going to practice this and learn this. If you don't love learning and that those fireworks go off of discovery, you're just trying to find something, content to sell, produce. I don't know if it works that way.
No, that's really good. So we scale up, we grow our influence, we're starting to write, we're starting to have influence and growing our audiences and our communities of the people that we serve. What advice do you have for me to keep that influence now with everything happening around us versus when what you were saying in the 90s at Harvest, to keep your influence as a leader, right? Because times have completely shifted. You've probably gone through a lot of that, right? Of how society is, how economies are. And so you've probably seen so much. And so how has what you teach now or how you coach leaders now shifted? Like, what is the conversation now?
Well, the conversation now is everybody is driven for survival, to begin being noticed and seeking to monetize every aspect of their life. And we got to make money. But if your drive is to monetize everything, life is going to be so disappointing. Love is not a livelihood, Alejandro. Most of the people you help in this life can't pay you for it. So you can't always be looking to monetize every single thing you distribute in this life. People will see through that. It will feel insincere. They're not going to attach to where you're coming from. So I tell young leaders, in your pursuit to make money, because now the content industry is massive. It's central. COVID has created, how can I sit at home, create content, and be wildly well off, just with content? Gosh, buddy, I don't know if content is as accessible as picking an apple off a tree. It's so many things form the diamond. So many things form the value. Discipline, discovery, intentionality, but seasoning, relationships, writing, thinking, education, all of this disappointment, having kids, friends whose lives are falling apart. All of these are the under earth pressures that form this diamond that once it's cold, created and polished, is delivered. So I think hacking our way, choosing speed over seed. I don't have a simple answer for young leaders that are 28. I'm 61. And some people say, I tell church planners, they say, if somebody asks, hey, how's the church going? Say, I don't know. Check back in 10 years. I'll let you know. It's because this is not a stock ticker. Sometimes we stumble on an idea and it monetizes quickly. Sometimes we need to think better, sell our lemonade better. Put the lemonade stand over here. This is your gift, Alejandro, is to help people say, hey, you've already curated legitimacy. If you position it this way in the market, you'll have a much greater return. That's being smart. It's the same way a farmer plants his seed, the angle of the sun, the hill he plants it on, nothing wrong with that. But just hacking our way to success without a personal life, a private life that is legitimate, that is a trail of tears of broken relationships. I would say young leaders who want to be wildly successful, you have to protect your progress in life. You have to keep bringing your life forward. You can't cancel and move on. Nobody can live unknown anymore. If you've screwed people over, burnt bridges, lied, didn't pay your bills, all of that's waiting for you. It's called your reputation. Everything that you did back here is actually there to greet you in the future. So you have to work hard, not to make everybody like you, but simply to say that nobody can look me in the eye and say, you did me wrong and you never attempted to fix it. Now, they may still hate your guts, but no one can say, you wronged me and never attempted to make it right. You didn't own it. So there's not a room in this world right now, Alejandro, that I can't walk into because I think, oh, they're there. Think how much energy it takes in life to avoid people. When you live with a clear conscience and you're making certain you're going slow enough with humility to clean up any mess you created, even though you may not have left a fan back there, they may be mad at you. It didn't work. No chemistry. We moved on. They can't say that you were wrong to them or mistreated them. So there's not a room in the world that I walk in and check the room out to see if they're there. Are they here? I can't tell you the freedom at 61 to spend your life not avoiding anybody.
Yeah, that is powerful. And I sometimes every few years I'll think, man, thank God I didn't do some of these stupid things that I thought about. Thank God that I didn't cross certain people or whatever, man, because I was a punk kid, and now everything, like you said, everyone's kind of known. People know, it's a small world. It's a more connected. It's a more connected world, but it's not really connected in a very fascinating way. What are you in your life, and of everything that you've accomplished, like what are you most proud of that you've accomplished? There's one single thing, top of your head, this is the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah. That I discovered and have cultivated 41 years with one person in my life as a wife, that haven't had an affair. I haven't, I'm not a perfect man, but that Karen and I can be alone in this house after 41 years, both in our 60s. We're laughing our heads off over something we were talking about. We're making plans for what we're doing for lunch. And we passed each other in the hallway and we just bumped into each other, gave each other a hug. I know it seems trite, but the fact that somehow this woman I met, that we have kept this marriage alive and strong, without a doubt, the greatest contribution, Ollie, we give this world is not the company we build. It's not the church we build. It's the family we build. We have to bless the earth with our family. And the fact that all four of my kids are wanting to replicate their childhood right now with their kids. So we visited Tyler. They're going to pizza. They're at the Little League game, the home. It's exactly his childhood. Now, I never wanted my child to have my childhood. So in one generation, to have your child who you did not want to have your childhood desire that their child has their childhood. I'm not trying to be the Riddler here. It's without a doubt the greatest feeling in the world is seeing my children seeking to replicate their childhood family life with their families.
Yeah. When I'm 60, if we keep talking about family, I just start bawling. But when I'm 61, I'll give you a call and I want to see if that's true. I want to see if are they, because I feel like this, I don't want my kids to have, and I've worked so hard.
Yeah.
And then replicating, I think that's such a beautiful thing. And I'm not going to talk on that more because I will cry. How can people connect? How can people connect with you and learn more? Talk a little bit about the 5-Minute Leadership podcast that you're doing on Instagram. Can you talk a little about how the best places to connect with you.
Yeah. Well, where I'm focusing my life, I just came out of 6 intense years of leading a university, administrating North Central. COVID, the George Floyd death was right next to my school within a few blocks. It's very intense decision making. You're just, time. So this new season's wonderful. I'm focusing on teaching and preaching and writing. So I'm doing postdoctoral work at a great university back east. And I am doing some exciting research at this university. And then I'm preaching and teaching. I'm traveling 20 to 30 weekends a year. I'm in Las Vegas this Sunday. I was in Des Moines last Friday night at a big men's conference. And I preached at Hope City in Houston that previous Sunday. And then I'm here in Sacramento 1 to 2 weekends a month. I lead a mentoring cohort. I work with Scott Wilson, and I'm leading an exciting cohort of 14 Black pastors that are just amazing, and part of this wonderful network of Black congregations. And the Lord has brought us all together. That's exhilarating for me. And then I started this. I'm still writing. We have a new marriage book. It's all submitted to the publisher. It comes out. It'll come out in the spring. It's called No Ordinary Promise, and it's a gift book full of beautiful photography and short sayings and stories that's really our marriage philosophy. So that book comes out in the spring. But the big piece is I started about 9 weeks ago, a brand new initiative. I got a beautiful studio. I published something called the 5-Minute Leadership Class, and it seems to be taking root between LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook Reels. It's getting about 10,000 unique views a week, and it's just kind of an academic, pastoral. I'm a Pentecostal guy. So there's a fire and intellect, leadership, marketplace, church. It all kind of shows up in this 5-minute leadership class. And you can find it on Instagram at Dr. Scott Hagan. So Dr. Scott Hagan, Hagan, on LinkedIn as well. So that's kind of the two main spots that I publish it. Then I put it on a Facebook reel as well. But Instagram's the best space to find me on with the 5-minute leadership class, Dr. Scott Hagan.
That's awesome. I'll link up everything here in the show notes to make sure to give Scott a follow. And before these last two questions, man, just want to say you've been such I still tell people, man, you've been such an inspiration in our early marriage, as a father, as, a husband, and even as an entrepreneur, just your intensity of learning and discipline and wanting to live a life of character and integrity. You talk to God, man. You love God so much, and it's always little conversations back in the day that we had that I still feel so connected to you 15, 20 years later, 20 years almost later.
It's crazy.
So I love you, man. I'm really grateful for all that you're doing.
Love you too. And very proud of your family. Keep it going.
We're doing it, man. We're doing it. Okay. If you can go back to your younger self, let's say at 25, 30, maybe a moment in time, and give you some advice back then for maybe what's to come, life, like the hard times, the good times, bad times, what advice would you give to your younger self at 25, 30?
Yeah. Great question. Here's what it would be. I would tell myself, hey, Scott, be very focused, because this life goes slower than you think. It goes slower. Everybody says it goes faster. It actually goes slower, which means you don't have to have it all right now. Let things grow, plant, because life actually goes slow. And you have time to develop yourself. So don't be antsy and shortchange your life and let the seed. Don't be so addicted to speed and like time's running out and this anxiety. Slow is fast, fast is slow. The more I strive, the more elusive life is. The more I yield, the faster it comes. It's the irony of the kingdom. So when I'm running, striving, I just can't get it. But when I yield my life, somehow it always seems to come faster than I anticipated. So fast is slow, slow is fast. But life actually goes slower than I thought it would, which means, why did I rush that? Why did I have so much anxiety about that? It actually did arrive in the right time and space. That's the first major thing, Scott. Then the second thing is understand that most of the people you admire in this life are going to fail.
Hmm.
I've seen far more things not work than work in people's lives. So I'm going to accumulate all of these observational disappointments in people. What is it going to cause me to deteriorate? And, it's not midlife crisis, Ollie. It really is scientific that around 45, most people start to deteriorate and no longer develop north of 45. And I do a whole presentation. I got to speak to the U.S. Black Hawk pilots at Hunter Air Base about this. Got 90 minutes. The guys who actually flew into bin Laden's home and compound were in the room. The Zero Dark 30 guys, not from the movie, but the original guys that went in were in the room. It was 90 pilots, and I got 90 minutes with them. And we talked about deterioration north of 45. And I gave some steps. It is kind of a talk I do. How do I develop it north of 45? Because I'm accumulating so many disappointments through people who I love, that their marriages are failed, their business failed, their ideas didn't work. They now are becoming bitter. Their outlook is toxic. How do I, like Caleb in the Bible, say I'm as strong today at 85 as I was at 40 for going out, for coming in? Everybody in Caleb's world failed except Joshua. How am I around this ocean of disappointment in others and yet be this beautiful greenhouse of development in the heart of that? So it caught me off guard when I would see people who I knew well turn their back on God. It caught me off guard to see people in their 40s abandon their marriage. And it's like I was shaken by it. But then I began to understand that this is one, the Bible says the love of people's hearts grow cold. And Caleb saw all of his friends become idolaters. So knowing that I'm not connected to any of that I have to be the only Christian in the room. And if my wife and if our marriage flourishes, it's going to happen regardless if our friends fail. So I have to have that mindset. And that's been the other thing I would have told myself at a younger stage.
That's so good. That's so good. What is your definition of the holy hustle?
Yeah. When I think of the hustle, I was a basketball player, so I heard the word hustle there, that it's something on the inside of me. I found that there was another way to define hustle, like I'm going to hustle you. I'm going to hustle you out of something. I'm going to head fake you. I'm going to be deceitful. I'm going to extract something from you in a way that's manipulative. So the holy hustle for me means a God-honoring willpower and work ethic, a God-honoring ingenuity that's holy, and that I'm driven by a passion and a fire to get my fanny out of bed in the morning, to make certain I'm not up all night playing video games or scrolling or on YouTube, and that I'm resting, because the number one indicator that life's out of alignment, Alejandro, is insomnia. The inability, because sleep and rest is the great promise of Scripture. He gives his godly sleep. If I can't sleep at night, I have to really if I have to be pumping, melatonins and everything else just to, turn it all down. Something's out of alignment. But the hustle piece for me is making certain it's holy, that I am honoring God, but I am driven and then lastly is this. It's the difference between energy and strength. I'm 61. My energy dips, but I'm not. It doesn't mean I'm not strong. So
Mm.
Psalms 1 says, blessed is a man whose tree is firmly planted by the rivers of living water. There's a difference between rain and the river. Rain refreshes, but the river is what supplies the root system. I have to live because I'm near the river of God, not simply waiting for something to fall out of heaven to keep me alive. So I need energy. I need refreshing. I need to sleep. I need, an energy drink every now and then. I need energy. That doesn't mean I'm not strong. So don't live off energy. Develop strength of in the secret place. Let the roots be down by the
So
river
good.
of God, which is different than rain. But hustle. That's on me. That's my
Yeah.
godly fullness, living to my full potentiality as a leader, maximizing my lifespan, leaving nothing on the table. So I just want to honor God. That's the holy hustle for me.
Come on, man. The best leader, communicator I know, guys. And man, this has been a blast. You have so much. I got to do a part two eventually as you are able to share the next level with the school you're going to, some cool news there, the stuff that you'll be able to publish and create as a result of that. But man, I love you. So grateful for you. This has been just fire. And I'm excited to get this out to everyone.